Okay, our class was the very last class to draw papers to pick out our time period. Guess which one it was? The Neoclassical Era, the one in England. So, let's begin. What is the Neoclassical period really all about? To be honest, we weren't really sure when or what or who the Neoclassical period consisted of. Was this era of huge poofy dresses and knights? Where did it take place? Wasn't there an American Neoclassical period? Keep in mind, we're talking about the European Neoclassical period here, not the American one, which happened a bit later. It turns out that the Neoclassical period is also referred to as the Restoration, the 18th century, the Augustan Age, and the Age of Reason.
This time period is rich in artistic, literary, and social movements. The term neoclassic describes the artistic style that washed over European art and architecture. Many historians get very specific and say that it spans from 1660 to 1798, the year William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge's book Lyrical Ballads was published, marking the beginning of the English Romantic movement in literature and ending the Neoclassical era. Simply by glancing at a few of the artistic pieces of this time, you can see that people are really trying to bring back all classical things Roman and Greek in a new way, hence the word neoclassic. For example, the ancient Greeks and Romans lived their lives based on principles of order and reason, which is why the neoclassical age is known as the Age of Reason. People turn their focus on common sense instead of individual imagination. As you can see, people in neoclassical paintings and sculptures looked like they were having about as much fun as us when we take AP exams. Paintings of heroic deeds and unsmiling, emotionless people were common, and apparently of many dead people too. The classical-inspired artwork revealed the values people of the era focused on, such as self-denial and self-sacrifice. The Great Fire of London occurred in September of 1666, burning down the capital. This gave the English a chance to completely reinvent their capital. For those of you who want to backpack through Europe one day, go visit these iconic neoclassical structures. The Pantheon in Paris was built by Jacques-Germain Soufflet.
You mean souffle?
Soufflet. The Arc de Triomphe, within walking distance from the Eiffel Tower, was built by Jean Chagrin. Chagrin? From 1806 to 1836. Did you know that Buckingham Palace in London is a neoclassical structure? It is! It was built in 1821 to 1835 by John Nash, and of course, is still where the monarchs of England reside today. Neoclassical style buildings are actually still designed today, but are often referred to as new classical architecture. In addition to the hundreds of facades that characterize the neoclassical age, complacency and comfort sat in the hearts of the British. Britain was moving its way from being a kingdom to an empire. With it being such a wonderful time politically for Britain, they felt as though they were better than most, both morally and intellectually. The middle class was on the rise and bragged that they were classy and had good taste, with men going off to coffee houses and women gathering to drink expensive imported chocolate. Decorum became more than a want, it became a need. The need for the best home decorations, hair, and furniture. With Europeans becoming more high-end, the demand for more sophisticated modes of entertainment rose, and literacy rates rose with it. Newspapers and periodicals became all the rage for the first time, and public theater became honorable once again. Novels were born, and the first book clubs popped up. Of course, everybody's a critic, and snobbery even in literature existed. One wanted to be highbrow and witty in all they did and thought and said. Going to church became a social event, and many churches were rebuilt to be made more fashionable. The Church of England was most popular, but Methodism was tolerated. Bottom line, when you think of the neoclassical movements, think facades.
The Neoclassical period revolved around the revival of the classic ideas and styles of the Greeks and Romans while giving it a new twist. Again, that's why it's called neoclassical. The English didn't want to repeat the chaotic methods and ideologies of the Renaissance, but wanted to respond to the political instability and conflict in Great Britain. The era is also known as the Age of Reason, which incorporated logic and reasoning. Together, neoclassicists favored social norms and common characteristics of humans while using their conservative ideas of the classical critics. Literature-wise, poets and authors wanted to redefine the roles people had and if they were fulfilling them using classical criticism. Since neoclassicists believed in reasoning and common sense, modern science of this age dealt with testing things of the natural world. The era was also known as the Age of Enlightenment since ideas focused more on intellectual thought rather than religion. Many of the Enlightenment philosophers believed that there were natural laws to the universe that could be discovered using rational thought. English culture is influenced by major philosophers. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a political theorist who pushed for education. René Descartes, or the father of modern philosophy, discussed the difference between the mind and the body and how only real truths come from what we think. Immanuel Kant created Kantianism, which in God, freedom, and immortality can't be proved or disproved, but they are essential. Voltaire was a French philosopher and a writer who advocated for the tolerance, the rights of individuals, and free thought, although he attacked the Catholic Church. Englishmen such as Alexander Pope, David Hume, Sir Isaac Newton, and John Locke impacted the Neoclassicists greatly as well through their works and philosophies. Empiricism rose as the philosophy of science and stressed the ideas such as tabula rasa, which is where we start out with a clean slate, and comes with experience, which are more reliable than any other beliefs. You can see the idea of tabula rasa implemented in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, published later in 1818, because the monster is born without evil in his heart, but because of negative experiences, it grows into a bitter, murderous creature.
Next on the Neoclassical roll call are the authors. We have many inspirational and philosophical authors such as John Dryden, Alexander Pope, Daniel Defoe, John Milton, and Samuel Johnson, who have all exemplified the role of being great poets. The ones who touched our hearts the most through their amazing poetry are as follows. The first poet that we are going to exhibit is John Dryden. This man was born on August 9, 1631. Throughout his short life, he worked as an English poet, literary critic, translator, and playwright, who was made poet laureate. He came from a landowning family with connections to Parliament and the Church of England. The first poem that he published in 1649 was revered by many of his peers. While attending Trinity College, he expressed political views through his poem. Later, he went on to find work with Oliver Cromwell's Secretary of State, where he gained the knowledge to continue his passion of writing poems. During this time, he commissioned some plays for the King's Company. His best-known works are Marriage a la Mode and All for Love, which was written in blank verse form, which was revered during that time. Dryden developed a style closer to natural speech, which remained the dominant poetic mode for over a century. Unfortunately, he died May 12, 1700. The second important man is Alexander Pope. He grew up around London for the majority of his childhood and became a respected poet. He was best known for his satirical verse as well as a translation of Homer's The Iliad. He became known for his use of heroic couplet in his writing. Moreover, he is the third most frequently quoted writer in the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations, after Shakespeare and Tennyson, of course. Although he was best known for his essay on criticism, he is highly respected to this day. He passed away and is now buried at Twickenham, England. Thirdly, another important poet during this revolutionary period is Daniel Defoe. He was born April 24, 1660, with the original name of Daniel Foe. Daniel was an English trader, writer, journalist, and pamphleteer. He was most remembered for one of his most popular books named Robinson Crusoe. He was one of the more prolific writers of his time and had produced more than 500 books, pamphlets, and journals in his lifetime. The content of these works ranged from crime, religion, politics, marriage, psychology, and supernatural events. He eventually married Mary Tuffley and had many problems with his relationship. Their marriage, however, lasted 50 years and they bore 8 children. In 1685, he joined a rebellion movement, was caught, and then pardoned. He then became close to the recently crowned King William III and became a secret agent. After a considerable time, he then died and is still remembered to this day. Another crucial and important person to talk about that characterized this era was none other than Jonathan Swift, born on November 30th, 1667 in Dublin, Ireland. This young man was raised by a family whose lineage can be traced back to royalists and people from the High Church. He attended Trinity College, although he was not the most exemplary student. When William of Orange invaded England in 1688, Jonathan took this opportunity to move from Dublin to England. There he became secretary to Sir William Temple, a noble diplomat. After some time in 1694, he returned to Ireland where he was ordained as a priest. Most of the poetry and writing that he did during this time was mostly satire. His most controversial and influential pieces were primarily satire on religious extremist ideas that were circling around during that time. Closing off this list of influential writers is the renowned Samuel Johnson. He was the last great writer of the period in literature. He authored and wrote the critically acclaimed A Dictionary in the English Language, which in today's terms would be the modern form of the dictionary. He also cultured and fathered the development of standardization of English. Without his hard work and testament, the English language would not be the same without him. Remember, kids, don't be the fool, be like Defoe.
The Neoclassical era had a rich history as well. Don't confuse the European Neoclassical era with the American Neoclassical era. The one we're covering in this video is the one that took place in Europe from 1660 to 1798. Meanwhile, in America, the Great Awakening brings colonists to their knees as they enthusiastically follow preachers like James Davenport and Jonathan Edwards. No, The American Neoclassical movement happened later on. While America's frontier revivals were happening, the Age of Reason was in full swing in Europe. The major events that occurred during the restoration of England begins with Charles II on December 15, 1660. Being the first monarch during the time period, he was secretly born a Roman Catholic. However, he still supported the Church of England. 2 years in 1662, the Royal Society was established in hopes of revolutionizing scientific advancement and then finding a way to implement into society. Then, in 1689, the Toleration Act was introduced, which allowed nonconformists of the Protestant Church the freedom to worship their own church. However, social and political disabilities still remained, such as nonconformists were still not allowed to run for political office, including Roman Catholics. Finally, in 1701, Act of Settlement was enforced, which was designed to secure the Protestant succession of the throne by prohibiting a Catholic from being king or queen. Finally, in 1690, John Locke, an English philosopher and a physician, wrote his essay concerning human understanding. He wrote that men often suffer this pursuit of knowledge because they fail to determine their limits of their understanding. His mode of thinking is a perfect reflection on how society is constantly changing. In his essay, he wrote 3 distinct goals of what we should attain for. 1. Discovering new ideas. 2. To analyze the meaning of that idea. And 3. How we can pursue that idea with our current knowledge. He later wrote 3 more books of how we can attain more knowledge and how we can build up upon it. Whew, that was a lot of info. Hope you retained enough information to write Miss Bauer's essay. Good luck on that, and that's all for now. See you again next time, and remember to keep it neo.